So if you remember, I finally got around to actually making a hardwired build in April. And it was pretty much a standard build, just, the shield, obviously to quickly basically proc my hardwired talent and to get these seeker mines back repeatedly. Since then, I have wanted to do different things with hardwired because, there's just not too much that you can do, or at least not too much that people have done with hardwired besides just making the standard, seeker spam build or the revive hive spam build or, something like that. And obviously with this last update, they did change hardwired so that you can't really spam your reviver hive. You no longer get it back. You only get a 30-second cooldown on it. So I really wanted to go in and change it up and make something a little bit different and a little bit unique. Now I'm going to go over the build really quickly because the principle is pretty easy to understand. But a lot of these things I was just testing out. I was really just trying to figure out a good combination of things to use. And the weapons that you choose may be completely and utterly different. Of course, I am using the Technician Specialization for that skill tier, and of course for the skill damage. I am using the Coyote Mask just to give myself a little bit more of that crit, depending on the range that I'm at. I don't have max crit chance and I don't have a whole lot of crit damage, so I think that's a good mask to use. Now with my backpack, I did roll the mod to a red roll so I could get a little bit more crit chance. I would obviously prefer a higher crit chance roll on the native piece, but that's alright. This is just a testing build, so I didn't want to spend so much time just trying to get the exact pieces. I am using the backpack because that does reduce the actual time from 20 seconds to 10 seconds. So basically I can get my skills back a little bit quicker without actually having any skill haste on this build. My chest piece, I went through a bunch of chest pieces. The one that I actually filmed here was just Gunslinger. I was trying to get a Walker and Harris, just something in the same vein, maybe with a different talent, but it didn't really matter. Whatever chest piece that you got, whatever chest piece that you feel comfortable with, that's pretty much what I tried out. I've tried out a whole variety of different ones. And as you can see here on my other hardwired pieces, if I already had crit chance, I rolled them to weapon damage, and if I did not, I just rolled, the crit chance and kept the skill tier on them. Now, the idea behind this build was I wanted a DPS build that could get skills back repeatedly and quickly, while also being able to deal a good amount of damage. You can see here my base stats, 48.7% crit chance, 67 crit hit damage. Those aren't impressive numbers, but this is a hybrid build. And obviously, since I am using hardwired, it's very hard to get a whole amount of crit on this build. Obviously, I have to choose one, and I'm trying to get a relatively balanced 60-60. That's at least, that's the most beneficial for low numbers, 60 and 60. I had high hopes for this build. I really wanted this build to work well. And, I really thought that there would be some, huge benefit to actually using a DPS build that was getting their skills back insanely quickly. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is, this build is absolute trash. This build was a huge disappointment to me. I could not even get through public events on Heroic with this stupid build. It was awful. It was uncomfortable. It was just bad. And there's some key takeaways for this. The first one being, if you are trying to go for a damage build, you really need to stack all damage talents. You need to stack all damage abilities. You need to stack all damage attributes. And if you don't, your damage is lackluster. Even with the amount of crit chance, crit damage, and weapon damage that I have on this build, the problem remains that I am still squishy. And the biggest benefit of having a DPS build is that you can at least stagger an enemy while you're shooting at them from cover. This build does not have enough damage to stagger the enemies enough to actually kill them before they can, basically just remove your armor. So unlike a full DPS build, you don't have that defense while you're actually shooting at an enemy and staggering them. So you don't really have the ability to defend yourself through the use of incredible deadly force on these enemies. You can't do enough damage to them fast enough to stagger them enough to keep yourself from taking damage. The second reason that this build failed, the best hybrid skills do not work well with a quick cooldown. And that may sound funny, but looking at these skills, having a 10-second cooldown on some of the best skills like the Striker Drone or the Assault Turret don't really work very well because they are duration-based skills, meaning you're not going to be constantly throwing them out and constantly, taking them down. You don't need to because they're going to stay up for a long period of time. And then, of course, this kind of applies to charge-based skills like the Hive or the Chem Launcher, where when you get a refresh, you only get one of those charges back. You don't get the whole refresh on the skill. You just get one charge. And that basically means that, for a lot of the purposes of this build, it doesn't really meet the needs of how you're using it. One charge on a hive doesn't mean much. And, 30 seconds off of a reviver charge does not mean much either. It's terrible. Now, that being said, I did test this build in a multitude of ways. I tested out different chest pieces. I tested out different weapons. I tested out different skills. This is just the one that I recorded me doing. Ideally, the skills that I would want to use are something like the sticky bomb, or, like the airburst seeker, or maybe even, just the explosive seeker, single use, large damage skills. But again, this is the problem. Because I'm trying to compensate for my brand set's weakness in weapon damage with actually using weapon damage, I don't actually have enough investment into skills themselves for them to be meaningful in any way. I can hit an enemy with a Seeker Mine, or I can hit an enemy with a Sticky Bomb, and it doesn't do anything. I mean, it barely tickles them. Even a red bar, will survive me hitting them with both skills. It's just not good enough. This kind of hybridization does not work in the game. A lot of the damage in the game depends 100% on you stacking every single thing with it. So you need to have a high weapon damage. You need to have a high crit chance or headshot damage number. You need to have the talents that boost your total weapon damage or your amplified weapon damage. Without those things, the damage that you do is just pitiful. And then when you're trying to actually compensate for that lack of weapon damage with higher tier skills, the problem is that, skills just don't compare to weapon damage in this manner. Skills need the exact same investment. They need a lot of skill tier investment, they need a lot of skill damage investment, and they also need a lot of the different talents that actually give you total skill damage or amplified damage. So basically the end result is that I'm left with a very poor skill damage, and I'm left with a very poor weapon damage. My skills do not do enough damage to actually kill enemies quickly, and my weapons do not do enough damage to either stagger enemies or kill them quickly. Now, the reason that I'm making this video, if you saw my video about my status effect tank build, it's basically just showing that, some combinations, some hybrids are just terrible. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. If you had a perfect crew, if you had a perfect group, yes, some hybrids may work in certain situations. But for the majority of content, a lot of these hybrids just fall flat on their face. I mean, this is terrible. I mean, I really wanted this to work. I wanted to see this work because this was something that I've been thinking about for a while. It's taken me a while to actually get, good hardwired pieces with roles that I would want. And I still don't even have the pieces that would be great. So it's definitely a benefit that I tested this early to just see if it actually was competent in itself. Now, yes, you could argue that the roles that I have and the stuff that I have isn't perfect, but like I said, I've tested out a bunch of different things on it. I used different chest pieces with this, I used different masks, and overall, it's just a very lackluster build. It does not provide anything that I need. I'm not tanky enough to take the damage that I'm taking while I'm shooting my weapon, and I'm not dealing enough damage with my skills to basically be able to hide and cover. And that's kind of the mentality that you need in this game. If you are going for DPS, you need to be able to get out of cover and burst down an enemy quickly without taking damage yourself. That's the key to being a DPS build. You can basically just fight while out of cover and stagger the enemy. But as a skill build, the key to your survival is basically being able to peek out of cover, take a few shots, and then just rely on your skills to do a lot of the damage, and basically, just using your weapon to clean up or boost your weapon damage output or your skill damage output. With this hybrid, basically what I ended up doing was removing the benefits of being a skill build and removing the benefits of being a DPS build. No longer can I actually shoot an enemy out of cover and basically stagger them and kill them. And no longer can I rely on my skills while I'm in cover to be able to actually, use my weapon as cleanup. I have to constantly do everything on a very squishy build. And it is terrible. I died repeatedly, and I basically just pretty much just rage quit the game after I did this, because I was just like, I can't believe this build is such a fail. But yeah, hopefully, if you guys were even thinking about doing something like this, this saves you a bunch of time and keeps you from basically just farming useless crap. Now, with that being said, I am working on a build to salvage this idea. I really wanted this to work, it didn't. And so I am currently working on a build that is basically taking the concept of this build and improving it without the 10-second cooldown on hardwired, and basically just making a actual build that is going to hit really hard. So that'll do it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.